All right. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. This Shabbat, CBST joins hundreds of communities around the US, as well as in the UK, Canada, Venezuela, Poland, Germany, Belgium, Czechia, Sweden, Spain, Moldova, Israel, and Hungary for the 6th annual Refugee Shabbat, which has become a powerful annual collective statement, an expression of hope, of action, and of possibility. It is particularly fitting to hold our national program this year at CBST. And if you'll allow me to just fangirl for just 1 second, it is an exquisite honor to be here. I'm sure that you all hear frequently from people like me who admire CBST from afar. And oh my God, I just met Randy Weingarten. And over the course of a lifetime have seen in CBST a validation of our identities and an example of the very best of Jewish values in action. CBST demonstrates for the rest of us what it looks like to show up in the fight for a more just society, to be in solidarity and beloved community with others, and to show up for your neighbors, even the very newest ones who maybe only recently arrived to the country. CBST's ARC Immigration Clinic, I am told, has welcomed more than 1,500 individuals under the leadership of Noemi Masliach, Rabbi Marisa James, Noah Habib, who I'm told isn't here tonight, even winning asylum for 39 people, which is a huge deal. Your clinic has mobilized hundreds of volunteers. It is absolutely remarkable and a profound act of leadership, and I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking every single one of you who have volunteered or donated or otherwise supported that effort. I'm sure it's many of the people in the room. Thank you. Thank you from everyone watching this live stream. For someone, the action that you took and the kindness you showed meant everything. This year's Refugee Shabbat, however, falls in a sobering moment. Many of us are hurting, our hearts simultaneously beating inside of our bodies and somewhere else, maybe in Israel or in Gaza, in Ukraine or in Sudan, in Haiti or in Venezuela. The human capacity for empathy is staggering. And the opposite is probably even more staggering, the human capacity to reject empathy, to turn inward and embrace distance and division. Empathy is a choice, and at CBST and at HIAS, we choose it daily. For Jews, standing with refugees is an act of recognition of the commonalities with our own stories, honoring our history and our present, upholding our values. It is an act of welcome, sometimes an act of courage, and always of love. For me, it honors my namesake, my grandma Becky, who arrived in the 1920s through Ellis Island, my grandpa Jerry, who arrived from Cuba 20 years later, my wife's Holocaust survivor family, and so many HIAS clients that I have met from around the world who have moved from one country to another because they had no other choice. There was no option for survival otherwise. Welcoming the stranger is a mitzvah that is commanded of us more than any other, and unlike most mitzvot, it is listed with a reason, because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. And so because of that, we are supposed to understand. We're supposed to look inward and to understand that the stranger is equally human, that they are us. We can look to the refugees in our distant, ancient past, just as we can look at our neighbors and our friends today who have experienced displacement and come here as refugees to understand that migration is not new. Since the beginning of time, people have moved to new places for survival and for opportunity. I am so proud to represent HIAS here tonight. HIAS is an international Jewish humanitarian organization and the oldest refugee agency in the world. I am just one of nearly 2,000 staff members in 23 countries providing aid to refugees. And I'll just quickly acknowledge that there's also 4 other HIAS staff members in the room. My colleagues are here, Lauren, Emma, Brian, and Ayelet. I am proud to be associated with HIAS's historic work, helping generations of Jews to come to the United States. We estimate, whether they know it or not, that we supported the families of nearly half of the American Jewish community to immigrate to this country in some way throughout many... Okay, I didn't do that. I'm not that old. But okay, I'll take it. I'll take it on behalf of HIAS. I am prouder still to be connected with our current work of serving refugees, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or nationality, based in our Jewish values. We are on the Greek island of Lesbos, serving refugees crossing the Mediterranean. We are in cities all along the US-Mexico border, primarily on the Mexico side. We are in 13 refugee camps in Chad, where we're one of the primary aid providers to the tens of thousands of people fleeing the current violence in Sudan. And we are in 14 countries in Latin America, serving people displaced from Venezuela, from the Northern Triangle, and elsewhere throughout the region. In the past few years, we have dramatically expanded our work in Ukraine, and we have opened operations in Romania, Moldova, and Poland. And we are on the ground in Israel, providing aid to people who have been displaced from their homes following October 7th, particularly the population of asylum seekers from Eritrea and Sudan, which we have long served. We like to say, as Rabbi Kleinbaum said, that once we helped refugees because the refugees were Jewish, and now we help refugees because we are. I think that we have to be clear-eyed in this moment about the fact that the number of refugees around the world is rising extremely quickly. There are now more than 110 million people who have been displaced from their homes due to conflict or violence, 30 million of whom are refugees. I started at HIAS about 8.5 years ago, and these numbers are almost double what they were when I started. The root causes of this are splashed across the front page. Wars that have become protracted conflicts, failed governments that or will not protect their citizens, the growing effect of climate change on migration. Right now, the countries of origin of the largest number of refugees are Syria, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Venezuela. Refugees are largely and definitionally the victims and the survivors of violence, not its perpetrators. And they have the same need for safety and home as each of us in this room and each of us on the Zoom screen. These are rights that were granted by the 1951 Refugee Convention, which is established in the wake of the Holocaust to protect Jewish refugees and which still govern the sector that I work in. But they are not the only ones facing challenges, because we cannot and we should not address the refugee crisis without also acknowledging the host communities, which overwhelmingly are the countries that immediately border the ones that people have fled. Host communities and host countries, as these numbers will increase, will increasingly need support as well in order to be able to provide aid and help in a moment of need. And I think that in New York City, you can see what I mean. To provide stability and permanency to larger numbers of people. The world is not doing enough for refugees. There are far too many countries who have chosen to build walls, the physical kind and the red tape kind, to push refugees back into the sea, to send them on to another country, to attack the people that aid them. There are far too many difficult and dangerous pathways, far too many processes that take months and years to resolve. There are far too many political leaders who have won their elections with promises to keep refugees out. Let's get real that this is our story in the US as well, where issues regarding our border with Mexico have reached a fever pitch and will doubtless be a major fixture of the 2024 election. In response to a larger number of people arriving at our border, this government has unfortunately chosen to continue many of the notorious policies of the one prior, to implement an asylum ban, faster processes for interviewing people with the intent of removing them more quickly, more beds in detention centers, more enforcement, all with the stated goal of deterring people from coming in the first place, but this belies a misunderstanding of the very most essential thing that we're talking about, which is that many people are running for their lives, and they have no other choice. And so now, since they can't cross a bridge safely, or they can't wait 6 months for an appointment made on the CBP One app at the border, the options narrow to the most dangerous ones. It's a situation that benefits only the cartels and the coyotes. On a recent HIAS border delegation, we're about to run our 10th delegation of rabbis to the border, we visited a shelter on the US side of the border, and they explained that they were in need of donations and that they could really use some dresses. Dresses? We asked. That's unexpected. They explained why. That so many more people were arriving these days with broken legs after falling off the wall from 35 feet up. We are forcing people into these options because we are denying them any other options. We anticipate that this weekend, we thought it might be tonight, but thank God, the Senate will at last release the text of a supplemental funding agreement, which will include short-term foreign aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, which only will have been achieved by making concessions to other senators who are calling for long-term changes to asylum and border policy that tighten the screw even more. More expulsions, a cap on the number of asylum seekers allowed each year, a higher standard for their initial interview, and even a Philly resident like me, I know, just don't hold it against me, can see that this issue dominates the politics of your city. What if we could change the narrative? What if we could focus on the human needs and the people? Use all that money that's poured into detention, poured into lining up people with guns, poured into border walls, to actually help people get settled in, to become our neighbors, even to fill the employment gaps that this country has. To do that would require something pretty uneventful: systems and the political will. Jethro, in this week's Torah portion, understood that to build a society, you need process and structure. He understood that you need judges, you need bureaucracy. He would understand that the change we need will be created by the paper pushers, the forms, the structures that safeguard people's rights. He would understand that it starts from a vision of treating each person fairly, and it quickly moves from there to responsible implementation. I believe that we can do this, and we can insist on this. I believe that if we can't insist on kindness, we can at least insist on fairness, and maybe even of empathy. We are in quite a moment. The immigration debate is tied up with anti-Semitic theories. Anti-Semitism is being used as a tool to divide our movements, to pull us apart from each other and into our silos, even as our hearts are broken into pieces still from the attack on October 7th, from concern for the hostages, from concern for Gazans now on the brink of famine. It is all tied together. So what do? We lead. We lead to build the world we want to see. This year has brought some profoundly positive stories, and we've just heard a whole lot of them tonight in this room. I am not aware of any other synagogue that hosts an immigration clinic. However, I am deeply moved to be able to share that there are many synagogues who are taking action for refugees, and increasingly so. This year, the US government launched the Welcome Corps program, which is a private sponsorship model that HIAS helps to run. There are hundreds of groups sponsoring refugees to come to the United States through this model. And I'd like to highlight one such group in St. Louis, a congregation that worked to help an Afghan family. Later that same year, after the family was settled in, kids are going to school, the little boy from that family met another little boy who needed help on his first day of school and who had just arrived. That little boy was Ukrainian. After being so warmly welcomed by a synagogue in St. Louis, that little boy passed forward the welcome onto another kid who had just arrived following another global crisis. When Emma Lazarus wrote the words that we just sang, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," the words emblazoned on the Statue of Liberty and in your programs, she was not actually reflecting the public sentiment of her time. She was protesting it. She was like you. Actually, maybe she was exactly like you. She was a HIAS volunteer. She was another Jew supporting refugees. And she was writing in protest, and she was speaking out. It can be so easy to feel overwhelmed, like anything we do is a drop in the bucket in the face of global challenges. But like Emma Lazarus, we can hold the flame and the torch high. And here at CBST, you are doing it. Judaism teaches us not to see the refugee crisis as 110 million people, but as one person, and another, and another, and another. Each person equally deserving of rights, each person equally and infinitely holy. The change must happen at the systemic level and at the individual level at the same time. So I want to thank you to your community for doing both of those things, tackling it at the systemic level and the individual level, for taking the steps to welcome refugees locally. We are so grateful at HIAS to be in partnership with all of you, and we look forward to the change that we can continue to make together. And of course, I want to end by wishing you all a Shabbat of wholeness and peace, a Shabbat Shalom.